Her abusive father gave her away to a mafia boss as payment. What he did next stunned everyone. The bruise on her jaw was 3 days old. The one beneath her collarbone was fresher. His scarred hand tilted her face toward the light, not to strike, but to count the damage. Dominic Valetti's voice came out quiet enough to stop a heartbeat. "Who did this to you?" Serena couldn't answer, not because she didn't know, because no one had ever cared enough to ask. She was given to a mafia boss as payment. They thought her bruises made her disposable. They thought Dominic Valetti would finish what Harold Caldwell started. They were dead wrong. Serena Caldwell, sold by her own father to a man who could end lives with a phone call, has no idea what's coming next. Subscribe and stay close, because this story is about to cost everyone involved everything they have. 45 seconds earlier, Harold Caldwell had shoved his daughter through the double doors of a waterfront estate in Miami like damaged goods being returned. "She's yours now," he announced, straightening his tie. "Consider my account settled." Serena said nothing. 25 years had taught her silence was the only armor that never got confiscated. Harold owed Dominic Valetti's organization more than most people see in 3 lifetimes. Bad real estate financed by worse gambling. When the numbers ran dry, Harold found one last asset to liquidate: his daughter. Dominic didn't move from his leather chair. Fingers laced, jaw set, eyes unreadable beneath the chandelier's dim gold. He didn't look angry. He didn't look satisfied. He looked like a man running calculations nobody else would ever see the answer to. That terrified Serena more than shouting ever could. "She's difficult," Harold added, adjusting his cufflinks the way he always did when selling something broken. "Ungrateful. But she's young. She's all I've got left." Selling his daughter like secondhand furniture and apologizing for the scratches. Dominic's gaze shifted from Harold to Serena. His eyes traced the bruise on her jaw, the faded marks along her collarbone, the way she held her left arm closer to her body because something underneath still hadn't healed. Then his eyes returned to Harold. What Serena saw in them made her forget how to breathe. Rage. Not aimed at her. Aimed squarely at the man who created her. "Leave," Dominic said, quiet as a blade leaving its sheath. "But the arrangement, we agreed." "Leave, before I change my mind about letting you walk out." Harold didn't argue, didn't look back. The front door sealed his exit and his daughter's fate in the same breath. Serena stood alone with the most dangerous man in Miami. This was the moment her father had promised. Men like Dominic collected what was owed and discarded the rest. He stood slowly, 6'3" of ink and controlled violence. Serena's legs moved before her brain could stop them. One step backward. He approached, stopped within arm's reach, tilted her chin toward the light with a gentleness that closed her throat because no one had ever touched her face without intent to damage it. "Who did this to you?" "My father." Then the words carved into her bones since childhood. "I earned it." "Earned what exactly?" "Being unwanted." Silence. Then Dominic laughed. Not cruelly, bitterly. "He used you, because throwing you away was easier than being a man." 25 years of conditioning screamed that gentleness was the setup, that real damage followed the calm. "You're shaking," he observed. "I always shake." He studied her face, not with pity, with recognition, like staring at a ghost of someone he used to know. "You were not given to me as payment. You were given to me because your father believed I would make you disappear. Permanently. I don't understand." "You will, but first, food and rest. Tomorrow we talk." He opened the door wide, an exit, not a trap. Serena didn't move. Every instinct screamed that doors offering freedom were illusions. "I'm not your father," Dominic said quietly. "When I make a promise, I keep it. You're safe here. The choice to stay or leave is yours." An older woman appeared in the hallway, kind eyes, flour dusted across her apron. "Rosa." She smiled at Serena the way no woman had smiled at her since she was small enough to believe the world had softness in it. Rosa led her to a room overlooking Biscayne Bay. City lights scattered across dark water. A tray on the side table. Soup, bread, tea, still steaming. Rosa touched her shoulder. Eat, Serena. You're safe now. Then left. Door closed softly. Serena sat on the bed's edge staring at the soup. Her stomach screamed, but her hands refused. She'd learned that accepting kindness always meant owing something worse. She forced the spoon up. One sip, then another. The soup was warm in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. She finished every drop. Exhaustion crashed into her. She lay on top of the covers fully dressed, bracing for footsteps that never came. For the first time in years, she slept without waking once. Sunlight jolted her upright, still in yesterday's clothes. For one breath, she forgot where she was. Then it flooded back. The exchange, the estate, Dominic's impossible mercy. A soft knock. Dominic entered carrying coffee, eggs, toast. He wore a fitted black shirt revealing tattoos she couldn't see in last night's dim lighting. He set the tray down and pulled a chair to the far side of the room. Distance. Respect. Space she hadn't asked for, but he gave anyway. She caught herself staring at the ink. Looked away fast. "Don't apologize," he said, extended his right arm. "This one is for my brother Marco. 14 when a rival crew took him off the street. I was 17. Found him 6 months later. He never walked the same again." He pointed to a shattered compass on his bicep. "My cousin Valentina. Her husband fractured her jaw twice. He ran a consulting firm, coached soccer on weekends. He tapped a small bird in flight on his inner wrist. Everyone I didn't reach fast enough. Each tattoo was grief made visible. Loss the skin carried because the mind couldn't hold it alone. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I recognize the language your father speaks. Cruelty dressed as discipline. Violence wrapped in authority." His jaw tightened. "Your bruises aren't your shame, Serena. They're evidence of your father's crime." "What does that mean?" Dominic walked to the door, paused, looked back. "It means in 10 days your father is being honored at the Venetian Grand as Miami's Entrepreneur of the Year. 500 people, full media, and you're going to show every single one of them who Harold Caldwell really is." Serena's hands stopped shaking. "Tell me how." That evening, Rosa knocked on Serena's door. "Mr. Valetti requests your company for dinner." Serena's stomach turned. Here it was. The price for the room, the food, the safety. Everything had a cost. She'd learned that before she learned how to read. She followed Rosa to a dining room with a table built for 20. Only 2 places set, one at the head, one directly across. Dominic was already seated, pouring water into both glasses. No wine, no performance. "Sit." Serena obeyed, folded her hands in her lap the way Harold had trained her. Small, silent, invisible. The first course arrived. Grilled fish, fresh bread, roasted vegetables. They ate in silence. Dominic didn't rush her, didn't watch her chew, didn't monitor her plate the way her father used to, counting bites, making comments about her weight, turning every meal into an interrogation. Then Dominic set down his fork and looked at her directly. "Tell me something you've never said out loud." Serena looked up. "What?" "Something true. Something you were taught to swallow because good daughters don't say what they really think." Her throat sealed shut. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." His gaze was steady, patient. No threat in his posture, no tension in his hands. Just a man sitting across a table offering her something nobody ever had. Permission. "I hate him." The words came out like the first crack in a dam, then the flood. "I hate him. I hate that he shook hands with investors while I bled in my bedroom. I hate that he told me I was worthless so many times I memorized the rhythm of it. I hate that he laughed with his golf friends about being a family man while I was teaching myself how to set a dislocated finger at 14. I hate that when he shoved me through your door, he didn't even look back. Not once. Silence filled the room. Serena's chest heaved. She expected disgust, discomfort, the usual look people gave when emotions made them inconvenient. Dominic nodded slowly. Good. She stared. Good? You have a voice stronger than you know. In this house you use it. Understood? She didn't understand why her anger pleased him instead of threatened him. Every man she'd known treated a woman's rage like a malfunction that needed correcting. Dominic treated it like proof of something he'd been looking for. Why does it matter to you what I think? His expression shifted, darkened. Because in 9 days your father stands on a stage and accepts an award for transforming communities. Media will be there, donors, politicians, everyone who matters in this city. He leaned forward. And you're going to walk in on my arm and show them all exactly who Harold Caldwell really is. That's revenge. No, that's justice. There's a difference. Over the following days, Dominic opened the curtain on Harold Caldwell's real empire. His study became Serena's classroom. One wall held maps marking Miami's actual power structure, not the one from newspapers, but the real architecture of who owed whom and what secrets kept the machine running. He slid a folder across his desk. Open it. Inside, society page clippings spanning years. Harold at ribbon cuttings, fundraisers, charity dinners. Harold Caldwell, real estate visionary, community champion, philanthropist of the decade. Your father's foundation raises $3 million annually for affordable housing initiatives, Dominic said flatly. Want to know where it actually goes? Serena's stomach was already turning. 60% to offshore accounts in the Caymans, 20% to politicians who keep his permits flowing. The remaining 20, he builds one model unit, photographs it from 6 angles, plasters it across press releases, and writes the entire operation off on taxes. He opened a second folder, thicker, edges worn from use. These are my people. Yes, some are enforcers, some run operations you'd never want to see. But when Mrs. Alvarez in Little Havana got evicted because your father's company tripled her rent overnight, my people made sure she stayed in her home. When Valentina needed to disappear from her husband, they had her in a safe house within 40 minutes. No questions. He leaned back. Your father's world runs on one principle. Cruelty is acceptable as long as it's wrapped in enough charity galas and tax deductions. My world doesn't pretend. We don't hide behind philanthropy. When we do harm, we own it. Serena stared at the folders. The moral framework her father had spent her lifetime constructing was crumbling. She'd been taught that people like Dominic were monsters, and people like Harold were pillars. The evidence showed exactly the opposite. Dominic moved to the window. In 1 week, you'll walk into that gala and learn the most important lesson I can teach you. What lesson? He turned, silhouetted against the skyline. That the real monsters wear tailored suits, sit on non-profit boards, and commit violence with paperwork instead of fists. He trained her how to read micro-expressions, the tiny flickers that expose liars before their mouths caught up, how to recognize manipulation tactics, the pauses, the redirections, the compliments designed to lower defenses, how to carry herself in a room full of predators wearing philanthropy like cologne. During those sessions, Serena noticed things she tried not to notice. The way Dominic stood close enough for her to feel his presence but never once crowded her space. The way something shifted behind his eyes when she figured out a lesson faster than he expected. Something that looked dangerously close to pride. The way her own attention kept drifting toward him when he wasn't looking and snapping away the second he turned. She buried it. There was no room for that. Not now. On the 5th morning, Dominic handed her a black card. You need armor for the gala. Serena and Rosa hit Collins Avenue, boutiques with price tags that would have made Harold interrogate her for a week. She chose a black gown, heels, and accessories that cost more than her father had spent on her in 25 years combined. Walking out of the last shop, she saw him, Harold, across the street with 3 men, his golf circle, laughing, relaxed. She caught fragments through the traffic. Honestly, biggest weight off my shoulders. Should have done it years ago. He was celebrating getting rid of her, like she was a car payment he'd finally defaulted on. Something crystallized in Serena's chest. Not shattered, crystallized. For 25 years, she'd believed she was the defect, the reason Harold couldn't be the father other kids had. But watching him perform happiness he'd never once shown her, Serena finally understood the truth. She wasn't broken. He was. Back at the estate, Dominic took one look at her face and knew. Serena's voice came out steady, cold, new. I saw him, laughing, celebrating, like throwing me away was the best decision he ever made. Dominic stood slowly. I want him to feel what he made me feel, worthless, forgotten, erased. Then we make sure he does. He reached into his desk and slid a document across the surface. Serena's eyes moved across the page and the room tilted sideways. Life insurance policy. Insured, Serena Marie Caldwell. Beneficiary, Harold Caldwell. Death benefit, $3 million. Policy date, 12 days before Harold delivered her to Dominic. Your father didn't give you to me as payment, Dominic said, his voice lethally calm. He gave you to me as an investment. He took out $3 million on your life, made sure I knew about his debts, then handed you over, counting on me to do what men in my position supposedly do with inconvenient problems. Serena's vision blurred. He wanted you to kill me. He wanted you dead and himself $3 million richer. 2 problems. 1 profitable solution. 25 years of escalating cruelty suddenly made devastating sense. The isolation, the destruction of her self-worth, the bruises that worsened every year. Harold hadn't been cruel from anger. He'd been preparing a murder. I don't want him killed, Serena said, her voice turning to ice. I want him destroyed. Publicly. Permanently. I want everyone who's ever shaken his hand to know exactly what he is. Dominic's smile was cold justice. Then we give them a show Miami will never forget. Serena and Dominic spent the rest of that night in his study, with the insurance policy on the desk between them, planning every detail. When dawn broke over Biscayne Bay, Dominic had laid out the entire operation. I can make this clean, he said. Your father has an accident. No mess, no questions. He simply disappears. Serena's response was immediate. No. Dominic's eyebrow lifted. Don't kill him. Her voice was steady, cold. Death is too easy. Death ends his suffering. I want it to continue. For years. Something shifted across his face. Respect. Perhaps the first time he'd seen this version of her. What do you want? Serena stood and walked to the window where Miami sprawled beneath them, glittering and oblivious. I want him to lose everything he actually values. Not his life. He doesn't even value that. His reputation, his money, his status, his golf buddies, his handshake deals. I want him to wake up every single morning knowing he tried to murder his own daughter for insurance money and failed spectacularly. Dominic studied her for a long moment, then smiled, genuinely impressed. You want consequences, not revenge. I want him to understand what he threw away, what he tried to erase, and I want him to live with that knowledge forever. He pulled out his leather notebook and began writing. The gala is tomorrow night. 500 guests, full media coverage, live streamed to major donors nationwide. Your father is receiving Entrepreneur of the Year for transforming underserved communities. He slid the guest list toward her. We give him the audience he craves, then we give them the truth he's been hiding. Serena scanned the names. Senators, CEOs, old money dynasties, media executives, foundation directors. My people have access to the ballroom's AV system, Dominic continued. The hotel's head of security owes me several favors. The moment your father takes the stage for his acceptance speech, we take control of the screens, display everything. The insurance policy, the offshore accounts, medical records from your hospital visits spanning years, all documented, verified, undeniable. He leaned forward. And you'll stand there in that ballroom, visible proof that he failed. Serena extended her hand across the desk. Dominic shook it. Firm. An alliance forged not between victim and savior, but between two people who understood that the best justice isn't death. It's living long enough to watch your enemies answer for everything. Tomorrow, Serena said quietly. We end this. Tomorrow. The day of the gala, Serena stood in her room staring at the black gown hanging on the door. Her hands were shaking again. Not from fear of violence, from the weight of stepping out of 25 years of shadow, of becoming visible in a world her father had spent her entire life convincing her she didn't deserve to occupy. A knock. Dominic entered. Second thoughts? Terrified thoughts, she admitted. What if I freeze? What if seeing him turns me back into that scared girl who couldn't even look him in the eye? Dominic crossed the room, took her hands in his. His palms were warm and steady against her trembling fingers, and she didn't pull away. She held on. Then you look at me, he said. I'll be right beside you the entire time. And you remember, you are not that girl anymore. You survived him. Now you show everyone else what that survival looks like. She held his gaze. Something passed between them that neither named. Something that had been building in the spaces between training sessions and late-night conversations, and the careful distance he always kept that she'd started wishing he wouldn't. She nodded. I'm ready. The Venetian Grand Ballroom glittered like a cathedral built to worship wealth. Crystal chandeliers threw amber light across 500 of Miami's most powerful citizens in designer formal wear. Networking, air kissing, a string quartet playing something elegant and forgettable while waiters circulated with champagne flutes and rehearsed smiles. Serena stood at the grand entrance in the black gown, hair swept up in an elegant twist that deliberately revealed the fading bruise along her jaw. Dominic's hand rested on the small of her back, warm, steady, present. Last chance, he murmured. Every nerve in her body screamed, but her voice came out pure steel. I'm not changing my mind. They descended the staircase together. The effect rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped into still water. Conversations stuttered, heads turned, whispers ignited and spread. Is that? It can't be. I thought she moved overseas. Serena Caldwell. The daughter Harold had erased from every conversation. Walking into her father's coronation on the arm of the most feared man in Miami. Near the stage, Harold stood frozen mid-handshake. The color drained from his face the way water leaves a cracked glass, slowly at first, then all at once. His champagne hit the marble floor. The sound cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. Silence. It took Harold less than 2 minutes to cross the floor. His smile was fixed, brittle, assembled for the 500 pairs of eyes now watching every step he took. Serena, his voice pitched for the audience, warm, fatherly, the performance of a lifetime. What an unexpected surprise, sweetheart. Really? Serena's voice carried across the silent room, clear as cathedral glass. You didn't expect me to survive? Harold's smile flickered. Not even with a $3 million insurance policy sitting on your desk. Phones appeared from every direction, recording. Harold's composure cracked at the edges. His voice dropped to a hiss only she and Dominic could hear. You're making a scene. Stop this right now. Serena smiled, not warmly, triumphantly. Good, because everyone in this room is about to learn exactly who you really are. She looked at Dominic. He raised one hand. The ballroom screens flickered to life, and Harold Caldwell's empire began to burn. The screens displayed everything. Bank statements showing offshore accounts in the Caymans, the life insurance policy with Serena's name printed in cold black ink, $3 million, dated 12 days before Harold shoved her through Dominic's door. Then the photographs. Serena at 7 with a black eye, her teacher reported, and Harold explained away. At 13 with a fractured wrist, he told the emergency room she got from falling off her bicycle. At 19 with bruises ringing her throat hidden beneath a turtleneck in the middle of a Miami summer, Hospital records, teacher reports, all documented, time-stamped, verified, undeniable. The ballroom erupted. 500 people who had been sipping champagne and shaking Harold's hand 60 seconds ago now recoiled from him like his cruelty was contagious. Cameras flashed from every angle. A reporter near the stage shoved forward, phone raised, already live streaming to thousands. "Mr. Caldwell, did you take out a $3 million insurance policy on your daughter's life before handing her to a known crime figure? Were you orchestrating her murder for profit?" Harold's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The golden tongue that had charmed investors and deceived boardrooms for 3 decades couldn't form a single sentence. This is fabricated. My lawyers will, but the evidence didn't need his permission to destroy him. It was already doing the work. Across the ballroom, donors pulled out phones and made calls. Sponsorship commitments evaporated in real time. Board members who had toasted Harold 20 minutes ago backed away with their palms raised like proximity to him was a criminal offense. The senator whose campaigns Harold had quietly funded for a decade turned his back and walked toward the exit without a word. His wife didn't even look back. Serena watched it all, standing perfectly still in that black gown. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't gloat. She simply stood there, breathing, visible, alive, and let her existence do the damage Harold had spent 25 years trying to prevent. Security arrived, not to protect Harold, to escort him out. 2 officers from Miami-Dade waited near the service exit with questions about fraud, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and attempted murder for hire. The man who had walked into this ballroom expecting a standing ovation was leaving in the back of a police vehicle, while his mugshot began trending across every screen in the state. Harold passed within 3 feet of Serena on his way out. He looked at her, not with anger, not with defiance, with the hollow, gutted expression of a man watching everything he built collapse, while the daughter he threw away stood untouched at the center of the wreckage. Serena held his gaze, didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't look away. Harold looked away first. For the first time in 25 years, he was the one who couldn't hold her eyes. 6 months later, Serena stood on the front steps of what used to be the Caldwell estate. She barely recognized it. The courts had been merciless. Harold's assets seized, accounts frozen, properties liquidated. The estate itself, the house where Serena had learned to count bruises instead of birthdays, was awarded to her in a settlement so airtight, Harold's lawyers stopped returning his calls. She didn't keep it as a trophy. She gutted it, tore out every room that held a memory she'd been forced to carry, and rebuilt it from the bones. Rosa appeared beside her holding 2 cups of coffee. "The West Wing is finished. 20 beds, full kitchen. Therapy center starts taking appointments Monday. Legal aid office is staffed." Serena looked at the sign being mounted above the entrance. Haven House, where survival becomes strength. "My father spent his whole life collecting things that made him look powerful," Serena said quietly. "I'm going to spend mine giving people what he never gave me. Safety. And proof that surviving someone isn't the end of your story. It's the first page of the real one." She heard his footsteps before she saw him. She'd learned the sound of Dominic's walk over 6 months. Steady, unhurried, deliberate. The way he moved through the world like he'd already decided what mattered and refused to waste motion on anything that didn't. He stopped beside her, looked at the sign, then at the building, then at her. "You built something permanent," he said. "I had to. He spent 25 years trying to convince me I was temporary." Dominic was quiet for a moment. The tension that used to live in his shoulders, that coiled, constant readiness of a man who trusted nothing and prepared for everything, had softened over the last 6 months. Not disappeared, softened, like a blade that had been sheathed long enough to forget it was drawn. "I stepped back," he said, "from the business, delegated everything. 20 years of running this city from the shadows." He looked at her. "Time to be something better." Serena's breath caught. "What will you be?" He turned her to face him. His thumb traced the small scar along her jaw, the same jaw he'd tilted toward the light on the first night, the night everything changed, the night a monster delivered his daughter to another supposed monster, and the wrong one turned out to be gentle. "Whatever you need me to be." She kissed him, not because he saved her, because he showed her she was worth saving, and then stood back while she saved herself. Because he kept distance when she needed distance, and stayed close when she needed close, and never once confused protection with ownership. Because every small moment across 6 months, his hand on her back at the gala, his fingers steady around hers on the night she was terrified, the pride in his eyes when she found her voice at that dinner table, had been building toward this, and they both knew it, and neither rushed it, and that made it worth everything. When they pulled apart, she looked at Haven House, rising from the ashes of the worst years of her life. "No one will ever be for sale here," she whispered. Dominic's hand found hers. "Never again." Across the state, in a one-bedroom apartment in Homestead, Florida, Harold Caldwell sat on a second-hand couch, watching the evening news. The anchor smiled into the camera. "And finally tonight, a story of resilience. Haven House, Miami's newest resource center for survivors of domestic abuse, opened its doors today. Founded by Serena Caldwell, the woman whose courageous public stand against her own father shocked the nation 6 months ago. When asked what inspired the project, Ms. Caldwell said simply, "Everyone deserves proof that surviving isn't the end. It's the beginning." Harold stared at his daughter's face filling the screen. Radiating strength he had spent a quarter-century trying to crush. Surrounded by people who loved her, standing in the house he had built and she had transformed into something he could never destroy. He reached for the remote, turned the television off, and lived with his failure. Serena built her haven, Harold lost everything. And Dominic found something he never expected, a life beyond the violence. But the real victory wasn't the gala, wasn't the headlines, wasn't watching Harold's empire collapse on live television. The real victory was quieter than all of that. Serena stopped believing she was what her father spent 25 years telling her she was. She reclaimed her name, her voice, her story, and she wrote her own ending. If you made it this far, you felt something, and we both know it. Hit that subscribe button and join this community because we're building something here. A space where stories don't just entertain, they remind you what you're capable of. Drop a comment and tell us, what would you name your haven? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. We read every single one. See you in the next story.